Good evening. Thanks for joining us. 31-year-old Michael Rafferty has been found guilty of murdering, kidnapping, and sexually assaulting 8-year-old Tori Stafford. It's been nearly 10 very long weeks of trial in London, which is where Laura Zilke has been covering this story since the very beginning. Laura Zilke from London. My goodness, what an evening.
Oh, absolutely. The mood around here has been one of incredible emotion. In the courtroom, when the verdict was read out, there was a collective sigh of yes for each time one of those guilty verdicts was read out through friends and family. That came with the reading of each verdict. Guilty of first degree, guilty of abduction, and guilty of sexual assault. Then it came to outside here of the courtroom. Cheers, yells of congratulations, almost a party atmosphere. But not forgetting why we were all here, not forgetting about Tori Stafford.
The silence in the London, Ontario courtroom was suffocating on May 11th, 2012. Every bench was packed. Journalists clutched their notebooks, and family members held each other's hands so tightly their knuckles had turned white. At the defendant's table sat Michael Rafferty, 31 years old, his face expressionless as he stared straight ahead. For weeks, the jury had heard testimony that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Now, after deliberating for 10 hours, they were ready to deliver their verdict. Justice Thomas Heaney called for order, though the courtroom was already deathly quiet. Rodney Stafford, sitting in the gallery, closed his eyes and gripped the hand of his wife, Tara MacDonald. Across the aisle, Tara Stafford, Tori's mother, sat rigid, her face a mask of controlled anguish. The jury foreman stood clearing his throat before speaking the words everyone had been waiting to hear. We find the defendant, Michael Thomas Christopher Stephen Rafferty, guilty of first-degree murder. A sob escaped from someone in the gallery. Rodney Stafford's shoulders shook as tears streamed down his face. Tears of relief, of vindication, but most of all, of profound loss. No verdict could bring back his 8-year-old daughter, Victoria Elizabeth Marie Stafford, known to everyone as Tori. The foreman continued, his voice steady, despite the weight of the words. Guilty of sexual assault, causing bodily harm. Guilty of abduction. Michael Rafferty remained motionless, showing no emotion as Justice Heaney thanked the jury for their service in what he called one of the most difficult cases ever to come before a Canadian court. As court officers moved to escort Rafferty away, Rodney Stafford stood up. "You're a monster," he said, his voice breaking. "You stole my baby girl." The judge gavelled for order, but his eyes showed understanding. This was a father's pain, raw and unfiltered, in the face of incomprehensible evil. 3 years earlier, on April 8, 2009, Woodstock, Ontario, was experiencing a typical spring day. The small city of 35,000 people, known for being the dairy capital of Canada, was the kind of place where parents felt safe letting their children walk to school. Oliver Stevens Public School was preparing for afternoon dismissal, children eager to enjoy the warming weather after a long winter. 8-year-old Victoria Stafford was in grade 3, a bright-eyed girl with long brown hair who loved Hannah Montana and the colour purple. That morning, she had eaten breakfast with her mother Tara at their home on Fife Avenue, talking excitedly about an upcoming school trip. Tara had given her daughter a hug and kiss goodbye, reminding her that she would pick her up after school as usual. But Tara was running late that afternoon. She arrived at Oliver Stevens at 3:30 p.m., expecting to see Tori waiting in their usual spot. The schoolyard was emptying of children, but Tori wasn't there. Tara checked the playground, the school office, and called out her daughter's name. A cold dread began to creep into her chest. The school principal, Steve Hitt, helped Tara search the building. They checked every classroom, every bathroom, every corner where a child might hide or play. Nothing. By 4 p.m., other teachers had joined the search. By 4:30 p.m., someone suggested they should call the police. The first officers arrived at 6:05 p.m. Constables Scott Denisiuk and Heather Bish began what would become one of the largest searches in Canadian history. Initially, they treated it as a missing child case. Perhaps Tori had wandered off, gone to a friend's house, or was hiding somewhere as part of a game. But as the hours passed and darkness fell, the possibility of something more sinister began to take hold. Rodney Stafford was at work when he received the call from Tara. He rushed to the school, arriving to find police cars and a growing crowd of concerned neighbours. Despite their separation and ongoing custody disputes, Rodney and Tara put aside their differences that night, united in their terror for their daughter. The Oxford Community Police Service immediately issued an Amber Alert. Tori's description went out across Ontario. 8 years old, 4 feet tall, 65 pounds, wearing a white Hannah Montana t-shirt, black jacket, and butterfly earrings. She had been carrying a black and pink Hannah Montana bag. As night fell, hundreds of volunteers joined the search. They combed through Woodstock's parks, checked abandoned buildings, knocked on doors. The local Tim Hortons became an impromptu command centre, with volunteers organising search grids and distributing flashlights. The community response was overwhelming. This was their child, their responsibility. Detective Staff Sergeant Jim Smith of the Ontario Provincial Police was brought in to lead the investigation. Smith was one of Canada's most experienced criminal investigators, known for his work on high-profile cases. He immediately recognised that the first 48 hours would be crucial. On April 9, 2009, as dawn broke over Woodstock, the search intensified. Police helicopters circled overhead while search dogs covered the ground. Divers checked the Thames River and local ponds. Every registered sex offender in the area was questioned. Tips poured in by the hundreds, each one meticulously followed up. But it was the school's surveillance system that would provide the crucial break. Oliver Stevens had security cameras, though they were old and the quality was poor. Detective Constable Jim Knight spent hours reviewing the grainy footage, and what he found changed everything. At 3:32 p.m. on April 8th, the camera captured Tori walking away from the school. She wasn't alone. A woman in a white puffy jacket was walking beside her, and Tori appeared to be going willingly. The image was blurry, the woman's face unclear, but it was enough to shift the investigation. This wasn't a case of a child wandering off. Someone had taken Tori. The video was released to the public on April 10th, with police asking anyone who recognised the woman to come forward. The image, though poor quality, showed the woman had dark hair and was wearing distinctive white fur-trimmed boots. She appeared young, possibly in her teens or early 20s. Tips flooded in. Several people thought they recognised the jacket. Others mentioned seeing a woman matching that description in the area. But it wasn't until April 12th that the break came. A woman named Jessica Lloyd called the tip line. She said the person in the video looked like her friend, Terry Lynn McClintic. Lloyd was troubled by the resemblance and felt she had to report it, even though she couldn't believe McClintic would be involved in something like this. Detective Constable Knight followed up on the tip immediately. Terry Lynn McClintic was 18 years old with a lengthy criminal record for violence and drug offences. She lived in Woodstock and was known to police. When Knight pulled her photograph and compared it to the surveillance video, the similarities were striking. On April 12th, police brought McClintic in for questioning. Detective Staff Sergeant Smythe conducted the interview. Using his renowned interrogation techniques, McClintic initially denied any involvement, claiming she didn't know Tori Stafford and wasn't at the school that day. But as Smith presented evidence, the surveillance video, witness statements placing her in the area, her story began to change. After hours of questioning, McClintic finally broke. But what she revealed was even more horrifying than investigators had imagined. She hadn't acted alone. She had lured Tori away from the school for her boyfriend, Michael Rafferty. In the sterile interview room of the Woodstock Police Service, Terry Lynn McClintock's confession unfolded like a nightmare. Detective Staff Sergeant Smith, despite his years of experience with heinous crimes, found himself struggling to maintain his professional composure as McClintock described what had happened to Tori Stafford. McClintock had met Michael Rafferty, then 28, through mutual acquaintances in the drug scene. Rafferty worked at a meat processing plant and lived with his mother in Woodstock. To most people, he seemed unremarkable, a quiet man who kept to himself. But McClintock painted a different picture. She described Rafferty as someone with dark sexual fantasies, someone who had talked about wanting to abduct a young girl. On April 8, 2009, McClintock said, Rafferty had picked her up in his black Honda Civic. He told her he wanted to find a girl, and McClintock, desperate for his approval and high on OxyContin, agreed to help. They drove to Oliver Stevens Public School, arriving just as classes were letting out. McClintock got out of the car while Rafferty waited. She approached several children before focusing on Tori, who was walking alone. McClintock told Tori that she knew her mother and that Tara had asked her to pick Tori up. She mentioned a puppy to gain the child's trust. Trusting and innocent, Tori followed McClintock to Rafferty's car. Once in the vehicle, Tori quickly realized something was wrong. She asked to go back to school, then began to cry for her mother. Rafferty drove north out of Woodstock, while McClintock sat in the back with Tori trying to keep her calm. They stopped at a Home Depot in Guelph, about an hour away, where Rafferty went inside, while McClintock stayed in the car with Tori. Surveillance footage from the Home Depot would later confirm this part of McClintock's story. The timestamp showed 4:45 p.m. Rafferty purchased a hammer and garbage bags, paying cash. The surveillance camera caught him clearly, a thin man in a dark jacket, appearing calm as he made his purchase. After leaving Guelph, they drove to a rural area near Mount Forest, Ontario, about 30 minutes north. McClintock's account of what happened next would haunt everyone who heard it. She claimed that Rafferty sexually assaulted Tori in the car while she walked away, unable to watch. She could hear Tori crying and calling for her mother. McClintock then admitted to her own unspeakable role in Tori's death. Under Rafferty's direction, she participated in the murder of the 8-year-old girl. The details were so horrific that several veteran detectives had to leave the room during her confession. Tori Stafford, the little girl who loved butterflies and Hannah Montana, died in a farmer's field, far from home and terrified, on April 8, 2009. After killing Tori, McClintock and Rafferty concealed her body among some large rocks in the rural area. They threw away her clothing and belongings in various trash bins during the drive back to Woodstock. Rafferty dropped McClintock off and went home to his mother's house as if nothing had happened. Following McClintock's confession, police moved swiftly. Michael Rafferty was arrested on April 20, 2009, at his workplace. Unlike McClintock, he immediately requested a lawyer and refused to speak to police. He was charged with first-degree murder, sexual assault causing bodily harm, and abduction. McClintock, now cooperating with police, led investigators to Tori's body on July 19, 2009, 103 days after the little girl had disappeared. The location was exactly as McClintock had described, a remote area near Mount Forest, about 100 kilometers from Woodstock. Tori's remains were found under a pile of rocks, partially concealed by underbrush. The recovery team worked with infinite care and respect. Detective Inspector Mark Gauthier, who oversaw the recovery, later testified about the profound impact the scene had on everyone present. Hardened police officers wept openly. The forensic anthropologist, Dr. Michael Pickup, who examined the remains, would later testify that the injuries were consistent with McClintock's account of the murder. The news of Tori's body being found rippled through Woodstock and across Canada. At a press conference, Rodney Stafford, supported by family members, spoke through his tears. "My little girl is never coming home, but at least now we can lay her to rest properly. She's not alone in some field anymore." Tara Stafford was too devastated to speak publicly. She had held on to hope, however slim, that somehow Tori might still be alive. The confirmation of her daughter's death shattered what remained of her world. The community of Woodstock mourned collectively. A memorial of purple ribbons, Tory's favourite colour, appeared on trees, fences and lampposts throughout the city. A makeshift shrine grew outside Oliver Stevens Public School with teddy bears, flowers and handwritten notes from Tory's classmates. The legal proceedings that followed would stretch over 3 years and reveal the depths of human depravity, while also showcasing the determination of the justice system to hold the perpetrators accountable. Terry Lynn McClintic pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on April 30th, 2010. In a London, Ontario courtroom, she stood as Crown Prosecutor Kevin Gowdy read an agreed statement of facts. McClintic showed little emotion as the horrific details were recounted. She was automatically sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the mandatory sentence for first-degree murder in Canada. During her sentencing, McClintic offered a brief apology to Tory's family. "I know that there's nothing I can say or do that will bring Tory back," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." The apology rang hollow to Tory's family members, who sat in the gallery struggling to contain their rage and grief. Michael Rafferty's trial was a different matter entirely. He pleaded not guilty to all charges, forcing the Crown to prove its case. The trial began on March 5th, 2012, in London, with Justice Thomas Heaney presiding. The courthouse was surrounded by media from across Canada, and public interest was intense. Crown prosecutors Kevin Gowdy and Leslie Passmore faced a challenging task. Their key witness was Terry Lynn McClintic, a convicted child killer with a history of lying and violence. The defence, led by Dirk Durstein, would attempt to paint McClintic as the sole killer, arguing that she had blamed Rafferty to reduce her own culpability. McClintic testified for 4 days, describing in detail the planning and execution of the crime. Under fierce cross-examination by Durstein, she admitted to lying to police initially and to her history of violence. Durstein suggested that McClintic, not Rafferty, had wielded the hammer that killed Tory. McClintic maintained that while she participated in the murder, it was at Rafferty's direction. The Crown presented extensive circumstantial evidence to support McClintic's version of events. Surveillance footage from the Home Depot showed Rafferty purchasing the hammer. Cell phone records placed both Rafferty and McClintic in the area where Tory's body was found. Most damning was forensic evidence. Tory's blood was found in Rafferty's car, along with his DNA on Tory's body. Dr. Michael Pickup testified about the forensic examination, providing clinical, detached testimony about injuries that spoke to unimaginable suffering. Several jurors were visibly distressed during his testimony, and the judge called several recesses. The defence called no witnesses, and Rafferty did not testify in his own defence. In his closing arguments, Durstein argued that the Crown had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Rafferty, rather than McClintic, had murdered Tory. He pointed to inconsistencies in McClintic's testimony and her admitted drug use on the day of the crime. Prosecutor Kevin Gowdy's closing argument was methodical and devastating. He walked the jury through the evidence piece by piece, building a timeline that supported McClintic's account. He reminded the jury that McClintic had already pleaded guilty to murder. She had nothing to gain by implicating Rafferty falsely. The jury deliberated for 10 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Michael Rafferty was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. As he was led away in shackles, he glanced briefly at Tory's family but said nothing. Outside the courthouse, Rodney Stafford addressed the media, his voice strong despite his tears. Tory was a beacon of light that was extinguished far too soon, he said. These 2 individuals have been held accountable, but nothing will bring my daughter back. Our family has been given a life sentence of grief. The case had profound impacts beyond the immediate tragedy. It led to calls for reform in Canada's justice system, particularly regarding the handling of child abduction cases. The Tory Stafford Bill was proposed, which would prevent convicted child killers from being transferred to minimum security facilities, a response to public outrage when McClintock was moved to a healing lodge in 2014, though she was later transferred back to a traditional prison. At Oliver Stevens Public School, a memorial garden was created in Tory's honour. Purple flowers bloom there every spring, and a plaque bears her name and the dates of her too short life. The school implemented new security measures, including updated surveillance systems and stricter policies about student pickup. The case also highlighted the importance of community vigilance and the Amber Alert system. While the alert hadn't saved Tory, it had mobilized thousands of people and demonstrated the power of collective action in the face of tragedy. Detective Staff Sergeant Jim Smith, who had led the investigation, retired shortly after the trial, citing the emotional toll of cases like Tory's. In a rare interview, he said, "There are cases that stay with you forever. Tory Stafford is one of them. That little girl deserves so much better from this world." For the families involved, healing seemed impossible. Rodney Stafford became an advocate for victims' rights, channeling his grief into activism. He established the Victoria Stafford Memorial Fund to support local children's programs and assist families dealing with similar tragedies. Tara Stafford struggled with guilt and what-ifs. She rarely spoke publicly, but released a statement on the 5th anniversary of Tory's death. "Not a day goes by that I don't think of my baby girl. I see her in every butterfly, hear her laughter in the wind. The pain never goes away. You just learn to carry it." The city of Woodstock itself was forever changed. The case shattered the community's sense of safety and innocence. Parents held their children closer, walked them to school longer, and viewed strangers with newfound suspicion. The dairy capital of Canada had become known for something far darker. Years after the trial, questions lingered about how such a horrific crime could happen. How could two people conspire to commit such an evil act against an innocent child? Forensic psychologist Dr. John Bradford, who assessed both perpetrators, testified that Rafferty showed signs of paedophilic disorder and antisocial personality disorder. McClintock was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and substance use disorder, compounded by her own history of childhood trauma and abuse. But diagnoses couldn't fully explain the incomprehensible. The case forced Canadians to confront uncomfortable truths about the existence of evil in their midst. It challenged assumptions about safety, about trust, and about the very nature of humanity. Child safety expert Jennifer Richardson, who consulted on the case, emphasized that stranger abductions remain extremely rare. The Tory Stafford case was an anomaly, she said. But it reminds us of the importance of teaching children about personal safety without instilling fear. It's a delicate balance. The case also raised questions about the justice system's handling of young offenders with violent histories. McClintock had been in and out of youth facilities since age 12. Some argued that earlier intervention might have prevented her trajectory toward violence. Others pointed to systemic failures in mental health and addiction services. In 2018, a controversy erupted when it was revealed that McClintock had been transferred to a First Nations healing lodge, a facility without fences designed for Indigenous offenders to reconnect with their culture. Public outrage was swift and fierce. Rodney Stafford led protests, arguing that his daughter's killer was being given privileges she didn't deserve. The federal government intervened, and McClintock was transferred back to a traditional prison. The incident reignited debates about victims' rights versus rehabilitation, about Indigenous justice practices, and about how society should treat those who commit the most heinous crimes. There were no easy answers. Today, more than a decade after her death, Victoria Elizabeth Marie Stafford is remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived. Her family and community have worked tirelessly to ensure that her legacy is one of love, not loss. The Victoria Stafford Memorial Fund has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for children's programs in Oxford County. Every year on April 8th, purple ribbons appear throughout Woodstock as the community remembers a little girl who loved butterflies and dreamed of becoming a dancer. At Oliver Stevens Public School, new students learn about Tory's Garden, though the full story of its origin is saved for when they're older. The garden has become a place of peace and reflection, where children can sit quietly among the purple flowers and watch butterflies dance in the sunlight. Rodney Stafford continues his advocacy work, speaking at conferences and working with legislators to strengthen child protection laws. He carries a photo of Tory in his wallet, not from the missing posters that once covered the country, but from her 8th birthday party, just weeks before she died. In it, she's laughing, cake frosting on her nose, surrounded by friends. "That's how I choose to remember her," he says, "full of life and joy. That's the Tory the world should know." Tara Stafford has found her own way to cope, establishing a quiet life away from the public eye. She volunteers with a local crisis centre, helping other parents navigate unimaginable loss. She doesn't speak of Tory often, but when she does, it's with a mixture of profound sadness and fierce love. The investigation team that worked on Tory's case established new protocols for missing child cases that have been adopted across Canada. The Stafford Protocol emphasises immediate video review, broader initial search parameters, and enhanced coordination between police services. Michael Rafferty remains in Millhaven Institution, a maximum security prison in Ontario. He has never admitted guilt or shown remorse. His appeals have been denied. He will not be eligible for parole until 2037. Terry Lynn McClintic is serving her sentence at the Grand Valley Institution for Women. She has reportedly participated in programming and education while incarcerated. Her earliest possible parole date is 2035. Whether she has truly accepted responsibility for her actions remains a matter of debate. The farmer who owned the field where Tory was found has never spoken publicly about the case. The area has been left undisturbed, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Sometimes people leave flowers there, purple ones usually, though there's no official memorial. It's a place of sorrow, not somewhere for remembrance. As this story concludes, it's important to remember that behind the legal proceedings, the investigations, and the media coverage was a real child whose life was cut tragically short. Victoria Stafford was a daughter, a granddaughter, a friend, and a student. She had favourite songs and foods, dreams and fears, good days and bad days. She was learning to ride a bike without training wheels. She had just gotten her first pair of glasses and was self-conscious about them. She loved macaroni and cheese and could spend hours drawing butterflies. In the end, the story of Tory Stafford is not just about the evil that took her life, but about the love that continues to honour her memory. It's about a community that came together in the face of unimaginable tragedy. It's about a justice system that, while imperfect, worked to hold her killers accountable. Most of all, it's about ensuring that Victoria Elizabeth Marie Stafford is never forgotten, that her light, though extinguished far too soon, continues to shine in the hearts of all who remember her. The purple butterflies painted on the walls of Oliver Stevens Public School serve as a daily reminder of a little girl who should have had the chance to grow up, to chase her dreams, to become whoever she wanted to be. Instead, she became a symbol of innocence lost, of every parent's worst nightmare, but also of a community's resilience and a family's undying love. As Rodney Stafford once said at a memorial service, his voice breaking, but his message clear, "Evil tried to win that day, but it didn't, because we remember Tory with love, and love is always stronger than hate. Always." This account is based on the true events surrounding the murder of Victoria Stafford in 2009. The facts have been drawn from court records, media reports, and public statements. While every effort has been made to present the story accurately and respectfully, some details have been synthesized from multiple sources. The focus remains on honouring Tori's memory and the pursuit of justice in her name.